Hey guys, how's it going? Clayton here at etrailer.com. Today we'll be taking a look at, and I'll show you some of the features of Roadmaster's Smart Diode Kit for our 2020 Jeep Wrangler. So our diode wiring is going to be one of the main key components in our flat toe setup. We have our base plate, our tow bar, our safety chains, our supplemental braking system, and our diode wire. Our diode wiring is very important when we're flat towing. It's going to make sure that everybody behind us can see when we're turning, braking, or just driving down the road with our running lights on. It's going to make traveling very safe, and you're not going to have to worry about anyone running into you when they don't see you brake. One great feature about our diode kit here is all of our wiring and everything stays behind our taillight. It's very hidden. You don't have to worry about moisture and other things getting into it. It's much safer than having magnets and other sorts of lights on the back of our Jeep when we're flat towing. Our diode kit is going to let us contain that factory function with all of our turn signals, braking, and running lights. In terms of installation, this kit is pretty straightforward. You only have to cut one factory wire on each side. Now that we've gone over some of our features, I'll walk you through how to get it installed. To start our installation, we're going to want to run our wiring from front to back on our Jeep. I always like to leave a little bit extra on the front, that way so when we test, we still have a little extra when we make our final connection. So we're going to run our wire back behind our base plate and up through here. Our wiring comes out right here. You always want to make sure to stay away from anything that's hot or moving. In this case, it goes right up over our steering box, around this bolt, kind of back this way. And I tucked it right here behind some factory wiring. It's kind of hard to see, but I just ran it right there. It kind of seemed like the best place to put it. And I tucked it right into our frame rail here. And I actually was able to follow the frame rail all the way back. So our wiring comes all the way down this frame rail, and then up here, and then I pulled it out right here. So actually before we run our wiring up to our taillight, I'm going to go ahead and make our ground connection. Our ground will be our white wire here. On the Jeeps, I always like to put it right here on this brace. This collar can be kind of thick and it's really hard to drill into, but right here is always a good connection, and it's nice because it's protected from anything that might get kicked up behind our wheel. So we're going to take our ground wire, kind of figure out how long we want it. I'm going to trim right about here, so I'll cut this off, strip it back, and add a ring terminal. With our ring terminal added, we've gone ahead and started our hole for our self-tapper. We'll take our self-tapper, screw that in the rest of the way, and now we're ready to run our wiring up. Now we're ready to remove our taillight. There's a little plastic cover right here. You can take a trim body tool or a small flat blade screwdriver. We can pop this out. With that removed, there's going to be a white screw in there. It's going to use a 10mm bolt. Go ahead, take that out. You do want to make sure to hold the taillight with the other hand so it doesn't fall. With that bolt taken out, our taillight will be free. And then to unplug it, we're going to pull this red tab back. Then you push down on this little tab here, and that button will release our plug. Now we can set our taillight off to the side. Now we can shift our focus to our wiring harness. We're going to want to cut this black connector off. You want to be very careful and not cut your wiring. And after that clip's cut off, we're going to strip back this black wrap, and then we'll be able to make our connection. We can go ahead and bring our wires up. We're going to take a pull wire. We're using an airline tube. You can use a string with this nut on the end, or anything that you can actually get down through the vehicle to pull anything up. So we're going to go ahead, take our airline tube, and drop it down. You might kind of have to finesse it, moving it around just to get it where you want it. Since we're over here on our driver's side, we're going to be running our brown wire and our yellow wire up. You are going to want to leave a little loop of brown wire down at the bottom so that we can make our connection for a jumper wire. This will make more sense later, but it's a lot easier to make our connection here than it is behind our taillight, I should say. So we are going to pull up our wires. So we'll take our tape, tape our brown and our yellow wire to it. Now we're ready to pull our wiring up through. And before we pull our wires completely tight, I am going to take our brown wire and pull some back through. And then I'll tape a loop down here, and that'll leave us room for our connection later. So one really awesome feature about using the Smart Diodes by Roadmaster is we only have to cut one of our factory wires. So that'll be our car brake in and our car brake out. A lot of the other diodes you have to cut multiple wires, so there's a lot more room for error. Our diode's actually smart enough to relay our brake signal and our turn signal and defer the voltage. That way we only have to use that one wire. So we're going to take our yellow wire on our Jeep, cut that. Yellow wire will come into here and come out here. Our RV tail, which is our brown wire, will come in here. And our RV brake, which is our yellow wire, will come in here. And then we have a supplied ground wire. We'll go ahead and ground that wire here and then plug it in to our spade connector. So our small white wire provided in our kit is for our ground. We can go ahead, strip that back, twist our wire, add our small ring terminal, and crimp it down. And then we're going to use the supplied self-tappers to mount this to our Jeep's body. So I'm going to go ahead and put our ground right here. This will be up behind our factory wiring, and it won't get in the way of our diodes. So we'll take our self-tapper, go ahead and make our connection, and then we can add this to our diode. So we'll strip back our wire, twist our wiring, then we will put on our spade connector, crimp it down, then we'll wait to plug that into our diode until we have everything else cut. So our yellow wire here for our factory wiring on our Jeep is our brake signal. So we're going to go ahead and cut that. I always try to cut in the middle, that way we have a little bit of room if we ever have to come back and change it. So with our wire cut, we'll strip back both ends. Then we can add our spade connectors. Go ahead and add this. Twist our wire. And add our connector here. Then we'll take our spade connectors off of our diode. We should have two left. Then we can complete our circuit from our Jeep. So reading our diode, we're going to take our wire on the wire side, like the factory wiring side. We'll plug that in to our car brake in. And then on our plug, we'll take our car brake out and plug it in here. Now we can grab our ground and plug that in. And then we will cut our yellow and brown wire and make our connections here. So now we're ready to cut our wiring. I always like to cut a lot extra, that way the wires aren't pulled tight and they won't come off of our diode if the wiring ever shifts. So I always like to bring it out about this far, and we'll cut it, strip back both ends, and add our spade connectors. Crimp it down, and then you'll repeat that process for our yellow wire. So now we're ready to make our taillight connection, and then our brake. So now we can come in and clean up our wiring a little bit. I actually cut too short to be able to mount that box to the back of our Jeep, but as long as we clean our wiring up like this, we should be okay. So we'll go ahead, trim that zip tie back, grab our taillight, and we will plug in our wiring here. You hear that nice click. Then we can put our taillight back in, then bolt back down our 10mm bolt, and then taking out the taillight is the exact same on the passenger side. So here's that loop of brown wire I was talking about earlier. We need to make a jumper wire to run over to our passenger side. So what we're going to do is trim our wire up. And on this side of our butt connector, we're going to have one brown wire. And on this side, we're going to have our wire going up to this side. And then we're going to have a white wire that runs over to our passenger side. Now we can go ahead and strip back our wiring. So with our wire stripped back on the single side, we're going to want to fold that over because the butt connector we're using is pretty big. So we can grab our butt connector, add that on there, grab our crimpers and crimp it down. You do want to give it a nice tug and make sure our wiring isn't going to come out. I always like to hit both sides just to be safe. Now we can grab our white wire and our brown wire. We're going to twist these together, put them into our butt connector, and then we'll crimp this down as well. After that's crimped down, give it a nice tug, make sure it's not going anywhere. Then we're going to wrap this in electrical tape. You do want to make sure to get a complete cover on any of our wiring, just so it doesn't short out down the road. And then I am going to add some wire loom to this as well, just for added protection, because there is some rough edges down here, and we don't want our wires rubbing up against that metal. To get our wiring to our passenger side, I took our airline tube and just ran it through our frame and pulled our wires through. I still have to get it around this corner, and then we can stick our airline tube up and pull it out of our taillight housing. So with all of our wires pulled through, we can go ahead and tape it to our airline tube. The passenger side is a little bit tougher to get that airline tube through, but if you take your time, you'll have no problem. So over here on our passenger side, we have that same black sheathing. We're going to go ahead and trim that back so that we have more room to make our connection. So all of our connections are going to be basically the same as they were on the driver's side, but on the passenger side, we're going to use this green wire instead of that yellow wire. You do have to remember, we used a white wire as a jumper wire, so I'm going to make that connection first and then the ground last. So with all of our connections made, I can go ahead and come back, make that connection to our ground wire. It's going to be just the same way we did it on the driver's side. You can go ahead and put it right here. And you do want to make sure to clean this area off with rubbing alcohol before you do this. Go ahead and tighten that down. We'll add our spade connector and make our final connection. Now we can add our ground wire, and then I'll tuck our wiring up. So now that we have everything hooked up, we can go ahead and test it out with an alternate power source. We'll go ahead and test our taillights, our left turn, and our brake lights. And here on the passenger side, you can see our taillights are working. We have brake lights and our right turn. So we're ready to hit the road. That's going to do it for a look at and installation of Roadmaster's Smart Diode Kit on our 2020 Jeep Wrangler.